이제 토벌쳐 이제도 담비 취해서 뭐 세년비 공론 근주를 받는 리바세다 데셈바슈 다 강셈바치에 담비 취해다 장주 남기진비 아니 진다디劳动갑기다 섭지 다 가리를劳动그 초대 바세라 섭지 수요는 다 섭지 니바 루루 루기티니 제와제바 지달 중주로 습니다 와타 고무루루 루기다 다 고무루루기다 루스리다 우마비 루기다 지마 공바 제술 개바지다 망부슈저 되나다 용다 진이다와 다 우마비 슝라더니 배 개바 친구인긴 거다 조조인데 디나 민묘도와 어디 가도더라다 다 고무루루기티니 우메다와 수요세의 제수 아니 우마바티니 칸데스니다 우메 고무루루기다 우마르 조주기 제와디 잡단들라더니 고 우마랑 주비 초라 제와 잡단지 우마 탄주비 초라 제와 잡단지 그는 우마르 탄주 랑주 발아요 되니 도대주비 우마랑 주바 나주주비 우마랑 주바 오단 아니 된다나신 아니 나주주비 우마랑 주바 되니 진짜 되었습니다. 간드라치 제바수즈 셰바르와 되었습니다. 마이키지 시에다 도도도 아니 가리래 우마발라니 우마 탄주바다랑 주바스 니 제와 용다르데 이네다 진짜 디가수 디니마 방응진이다 진짜 값수 파위 태가디 루비 시대기더니 가리르스나 방림지 송도와 오다디 아니 진다디 같은 디가둘라 이바다디 루비 시디 송와디 중림 다라는 모두 지기 송주디 다다디면도 심다 같은 데 제름지기 된다디 시체바 중앙진 바테다 우연노 세워다 티바도 모두 된다 도진이다 어디까지랬다 담보 우마 탄주비 개바 로벤 중당 티니마든 우마랑 주바라더니 로벤 렌덴지 디제라더니 로벤 시와조 와 아니 로벤 시와조 담 들순다 도대주부 우마랑 주바 주주부 우마랑 주바는 되니까스나 로벤 렌덴지 도대주부 우마랑 주바 아니 로벤 시와조는 주주부 우마랑 주바 어디 도진다 예와 친이더니 방금 중당디 도습니다 디바도 조사레스다 드린 디오니 맞으시지
So please begin cultivating the motivation for the sake of all mother sentient beings who are vast as space to achieve do whatever is possible, whatever needs to be done to achieve the state of supreme, most precious Buddhahood. And in order to achieve that goal, then have the motivation to listen to this teaching today. And what is the teaching today that we're listening to? And again, it's the Holy Dharma from the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to awakening, to enlightenment. And we had this section here within insight of the preliminaries, the preconditions for achieving insight, which has 3 subsections within it. And so here we had last class going through this history of Arya Nagarjuna, the history of the commentary on the text of Arya Nagarjuna. So the actual exact wording in the text that we have here is the history of commentary on Nagarjuna's intended meaning. So that's section A, fulfilling the prerequisites for insight. Number 1, this was identifying scripture's provisional meaning and definitive meaning, and then this was number 2 that we last covered, the history of commentary Nagarjuna's intended meaning. And so there was this description of the different commentators who came after Nagarjuna, and they only mentioned, or Rinpoche only mentioned the most central ones, because there are many different scholars who each had slightly differing perspectives and ways of commenting. So these were the most important ones. And so what it covered was, so when Nagarjuna composed these 6 treatises of reasoning, then what were the different ways of explaining them that followed? So there's these 2 primary ways of the Prasangika and Svatantrika. Those are 2 primary sort of streams of commentary. And again, that's the consequence school versus the autonomy school. And within the Svatantrika, then there's also the Svatantrika who are followers of Svatantrika who follow according to the Svatantrika, and then those who follow, shouldn't say follow, but it's I'm not sure. Yeah, yes. Anyway, the ones who are in accord with the Svatantrika, and then those who are in accord with the Yogacharya. Those are the two classes or branches of Svatantrika Madhyamaka, the middle way autonomy. And then there's this explanation by Geshe about the history of these commentators. And what J. Rinpoche points out when he's citing Geshe is that the stages of evolution and history in the commentaries, that's accurate from Geshe description. However, the description of sort of what, the way of making the distinctions between the different middle way scholars, that was not quite accurate. It doesn't quite pan out or fully align with actually, how the different positions really are. So that was kind of negated, even though the history is accepted as Geshe described it. And so then you had the specific scholars that were mentioned, the most important ones. You had, so the Prasangika scholars, and then in Svatantrika scholars, there was Bhaviveka, and then following Bhaviveka, there was Shantarakshita. So Bhaviveka is the one who founded the Svatantrika, who are in accord with Svatantrika, the Sutra school, and then Shantarakshita was the scholar who founded the system where the Svatantrikas who are in accord with the Yogacharya school.
다진다 디 강들라 아니 로벨링데지 고나졸라 아니 도대치비 우마랑 주바체 로벨 시바조 고나졸라 난주 주바세디다 지 가리레 치든 여바 체레바 도대비 루다 투마르와 단얘기 남샤 투마 체레미 전에 도대 주바스 민다와라 다 치든 미시비 온도 전에 아니 난주 주바 선자마 투미 온도 전에 난주 주바스 민다와라 딘난지 전에 로벨 멘다딘다디 반된다고 잡아게 치든 캐린 거. 다 치든 캐린도 도대체 봤습니다. 알아봤나 도대체 봤어요. 제라마다 tum바스 딘데기 단예다와도 노아레스. 그래서는 반된다고 잡아기로 와 치든 캐린장 디 치든 캐린 바디 아니 가리래. 랑게 친이 마주바 시지기 때문에 와 치든 치르선도 주바 와 또베 다성 수. 랑게 친이 마주바 시지기 때문에 치든지 캐와 인상 아니 도대체 우마바스 민단의 정말이스. 그래서는 또 단주비 투모 많이 남샤 단위 가서나 두다 홍마다 투모 많이 받는다 로그딘이 투모 많이 받으셔 제반은 예바 차고 스판은 다와 줘봐란 게와 아니 우마 직선나 디 송어와 인도전에 로그딘이 투모 많이 받고 쓴다 우마 단주비 로디 근데 두다 홍마리 투모 많이 받래 쓴다 랑게 친이 마주바 시지게 돈이 시고 디제도 아니 된다 로벨링데제당 도대바니 다 랑게 친이 주바 시지게 돈이 주고지 치료 체련 받도 되지 봤습니다. 디고르데 아니 반년 다와 잡아 치료 체련 받sam지 되지 봤습니다. 디 노아레스 직체 다나시 반년 다와 잡아기로와 치료 체련 랑리 케밀레 바인산 제라마하게 다 줍다 뒤로와 제라마와 대해 가서는 치료 체련 신 랑리 케밀레 팅밍 부담을 가사지라 제라마와 슬라르와 그래서 제라마와도 투바르스는 되게 말레스 미디마 가서는 제라마에 아니 가서는 랑리 케밀레 세지 디 셰바 남에도 비군생기로와 셰바드니 남에 세데다 비딘지스 오르와다 페나 운징 미셰 오부즈미 미셰 잡지나 아니 가리르스나 미기 옹부기 아니 오부 통화라 때니 아니 운징 미셰 께와레만도 지기 아니 미셰라 수나바 셰비 권네 세디 나바 샤와디 켈링고 말이 인자 셰바 남에 세도다 딘데도 지가네로와 오다 셰바 남에당 인자 다 수인 남바당 진빈 남바신 니기 남바샤메상 아니 랑지 디네 남바 디네 진남 야가와 세지 진남 야가와 수비 수인 남바당 수남다 진남 니수체네 진남 야가와 세기 딘데지 켈링기 메상 아니 가스나 지라마위 랑리 메 심군zen 티리 다 반네 다와 잡 랑리 메 송에디 랑기 친이 마주버와 아니 시지기 때문에 랑기 친이 마주바 인상 셰바디 용제기 때문에 랑리 로스 고마레스 와 언티니 운진 코랑기 운진 미시 코랑기 코랑 아니 티니 두투그레스 티 용제 로스 고마레스다 우마 주비가서 데가서 가바 먹고 잡여와 어디 제연도 다 돈도도 체람 가스나 치된 켈레 제자 가스나지 가리래 오 랑리 케밀레 바디 체람마 더우여 되는 체람모도 튜마스 자원님 지게요 말했어 병아라 봐 제럼 제마 병원에 개받는 누나라 벽이 개받는라 아니 반에 나와 잡아라더니 배도 되지 봤으니 치된 켈레미 전인데 아니 양지 치된 켈레미 띵도 랑리 케밀레만서 체람모도 튜마스 딘데 샤긴도 노르바레스 딘도자니다 노르수드나 아니지 도도체바당 나주체바스 닝따다지당 tin다갑디 치도의 켈레바당 랑리 케밀레바 대섬기 도도바다 튠바당 제라모도 튠바스는 되게 말해서 어디 세가 되셔스 지금이죠.
So we'll read a couple of sentences here in the text. One moment, please, while I find the exact line. Okay, I think it's here. It is evident, right? So that's the line about yesterday. It is evident. So this is now page 116, and if you just start like that first, well, I'll just count from the indented paragraphs. So 1, 2, 3. It is the third indented paragraph on 116. It is evident that this sequence of events as explained by yesterday is correct. However, while the Master Chandrakirti does assert that external objects exist conventionally, he does not do so in a manner congruent with the claims of other tenet systems. Thus, it is unsuitable to call him a Satantrika Madhyamaka. Similarly, the claim that he is in accord with the Vaibhashikas is also very unreasonable. So then, there's these two different classes of Svatantrika or autonomy Madhyamakas, right? The ones who are in accord with the Satantrika, the Sutra school, and the ones who are in accord with the Yogacharya or mind-only school or yoga practitioner school. And so what is it, in what sense is it in accord with it in terms of their positions about conventional reality or conventional truths? So the Satantrika Sutra school autonomy Madhyamakas, they accept that external objects exist in terms of conventional truths or conventionally. So that's in accord with the position of the Satantrikas. So that's why that division is there. And then you have now a discussion about Chandrakirti and where would he fit here. So Chandrakirti now, he does have certain things in common with the Satantrika in that he also accepts that external objects exist. However, it's not in accord with the Satantrika system because of the way that he accepts they exist, or the reason he accepts they exist. So the way he accepts they exist, external objects, is without having their being established by way of their own characteristics, without being established by way of a definition. So he has it's very different from the Satantrika because that lower tenet system or that lower paradigm asserts that external objects exist by way of their own characteristics, by way of their own definitions. And so that's a different. So we wouldn't be accurate to say that it's congruent with the other tenet systems or in line with the Satantrika system. And so it's not appropriate to call him a follower of, or a Madhyamaka who is in accord with Satantrika or a Satantrika Madhyamaka. So that is not appropriate. And so that's because, again, all the lower schools, they make their assertions within the assumption, I guess you could say, or within a view that the phenomena exist from their own characteristics, whereas Chandrakirti does not assert that. Then another point is if you say, well, then he's in accord or congruent with the Vaibhashika because he doesn't accept self-cognition. So this is also unreasonable, as it says here. J. Rinpoche makes the point, and that's unreasonable because, again, it's true that they are similar in that regard, that that is a similar position of not accepting the definition, the very definition of a Vaibhashika is the follower of a Hinayana tenet system who accepts that external objects exist but does not accept that self-cognition exists. That's what defines a Vaibhashika. But the reason, again, is very different for why Chandakirti doesn't accept self-cognition versus why the Vaibhashikas do not accept it. So it's not, even though the position is similar, it's not congruent. It's not a congruent position, or you wouldn't say that Chandakirti is in accord with that school, the Vaibhashika. So what is the reason for the Vaibhashikas to not accept self-cognition? Is, again, it's like if you take essentially it's because they don't accept that consciousness has aspects. They accept that consciousness is non-aspected. A neologism, but anyway, they accept consciousness as non-aspected. So if you have an eye consciousness perceiving a blue color, some blue in the field of visual perception, then you would say, the Vaibhashikas would say the blue is just out there and it's coming into the conscious, it's entering into the conscious awareness, and you have an eye consciousness perceiving blue. You don't have a position or an understanding where there is the eye consciousness perceiving the blue actually takes on the aspect of blue. They don't assert consciousness as having aspects in that way. So because of that, then they don't make a distinction between the aspect of the apprehended and the aspect of the apprehender. So that's what self-cognition is, the aspect of the apprehender. So it's sometimes called the solitary aspect of the apprehender. Zinam Yangawa is the Tibetan, if for those who try to follow the Tibetan. So Yangawa, I'm just saying, like, the solitary, it means something that's sort of sort of independent, or sort of itself, kind of, it's alone, something that's alone. So that's what the self-cognition is. So why is that? Well, Chandakirti, he has a lot of refutation of the position that there is this self-cognition, which is the aspect of the apprehender alone, solitary aspect of the apprehender. And so that's in his text he makes those refutations, but it's just essentially that he, again, isn't asserting that the phenomena are established by way of their own characteristics. So it's just enough. There doesn't need to be a separate experiencer to verify or validate an eye consciousness that perceives blue. Just the eye consciousness perceives blue is enough. That's enough to, there doesn't need to be a distinct experiencer of that consciousness. So so again, that's why we wouldn't say that Chandakirti is congruent with the Vaibhashika view. It's a different position altogether.
Oh yeah, that do it. Da kangri chögi chidargi keba nam uma bala tanjuba da rangjuba nigi tanye cheba ni siksada tuba rangsur misamos tena tanye du chiri dömi du niso nyela tuendama tongba ni nyebe tawa gyula kizu goni ming donayang tanjuran niso nyeba hinos da di kalsung warsana da denda pyonalarwa ji kangri chödisina pyonalarwa da temba ngadarda chidarasini da nishungarwa 다 temba ngadarasini da 다지 랑탐하게 되고 랑탐 때문에 못 공기다지 진짜 시와조당에 꼴로베 까말라 시오코난도 페비까게 땜바타비갈 땜방가 들신딩 나마 줄이 좋아 다 지더슨 조지 페비 내가다 무슨 랑담에 때문에 그냥 제라더니 다양 조지 페니야 땜바야 다니 어디로와 다 디니마다 땜바 치들기다 아니 벽이 개받은 수기로와 아니 우마 탄주 우마 랑주바 니기 탄니 제바디 아니 우마 칙세 반대 나와 잡아게 되죠. 우마 칙세다 튜니 아니 디시 자와레스 인도자니 디 아니 랑소 마레스보다 다즈 민직 그런 게 답에 강진의 따와 마레스 디 슝치무다 툰 슝치무 반된 따와 잡고 우마 치선나라 우마 탄주바다 랑주바스니 베 타니 세부여와 디 시작이 되는 수마레스 디네 송상 우마 발라드니 타니에기와 타니에기 최케레면이나 치된 되비 우마 바다 치된 메디비 우마 바스 니션나 리고레 다 따와 줄라 지수 온도진이로 사무동니 따와 줄라 지수 온도진나 아니 우마 탄주바당 우마 랑주바 니스니 오덕신다 티체바디 다 지르미지기 다 가스나 우빈니즈라 오다 디레스 디치디 다 가르송어스나 강라 병아라비 규마르 주비 우마 바당 디네 가리레 어난 디네 어나 나바지 우마 바신다 디기 계시집 되어서 와 된소 다 지에데 말 다나시 우마 발라도 되죠 나나 주죠 바스니 루빈 시데샤 디에 말했어 다디 인도산에 다 치된 체레비 우마바당 치된 케미르고 우마바스네 다 우마발라 티니니스 듀바레스 아 야나 따와 줄라 지존도 지나티네 가리레 어나 돈유도 따와디 탄주 점라 때네 아니 로와티네 네투바데 로와티 탄주 점라 때네 돈유도 따와텔라 바게 루들라 탄주바치 다 돈유도 따와디 탄주 점 많이 봐 텔레신베 랑주기 띵지 꾸비고네 돈이기 따와 좀 되네 깨봐 제거래서 어디 되게들라 랑주바 소다 독신이 단일이 아니 배 슝치보다 투마레샤 소다 디 아니 단일이 내바레 심지름지 어디 디수도
We're continuing for the rest of the paragraph. Next paragraph. Scholars of the later dissemination of Buddhist teachings to the snowy land of Tibet use the terms prasangika and svatantrika for different types of madhyamakas. Since this agrees with Chandakirti's clear words, you should not suppose that it is their own fabrication. Therefore, all madhyamakas are included within two types, those who do and those who do not assert external objects in conventional terms. If they are distinguished in terms of how they develop within their mind streams the view that a certain knowledge of emptiness, the ultimate, then again they are included within two types, prasangikas and svatantrikas. So then there's this kind of within the history of Tibet, and here the Tibetan text itself just says snowy land. So that's the right here the English imports or adds the word Tibet, so that refers to Tibet. And there's two different disseminations of the Dharma in Tibet. Historically, there's the earlier dissemination as well as the later dissemination. The earlier dissemination refers to the period of time before Emperor Langdharma. And so that includes the scholars like Shantarakshita and Kamalashila in that period. And then the later dissemination, that's the time period after Atisha, so after Emperor Langdharma largely destroyed the Buddhist institutions and the Dharma from the Dharma in Tibet, then Atisha came and revived it. So that's called the later dissemination. So within those, amongst those scholars, then they use this term, the terminology of svatantrika versus prasangika. And so what we're pointing out, what Rinpoche points out here, is that wasn't just an invention from the Tibetans. That was actually in the great classic Indian treatises, particularly of Chandakirti himself, and the Prajnaparamita or clear words. And so it's very clear that he makes this distinction himself between the prasangika, or the consequence middle way school, and the autonomy middle way school, or the prasangika madhyamaka from the svatantrika madhyamaka. And so then we can say that there's two ways that make sense to make the distinction of the different kinds of madhyamakas, the main differences. You can make the distinction in terms of conventionally whether they accept external objects to exist or not. So you can say that there's the madhyamakas who accord with the svatantrikas, and then the madhyamakas who accord with the yogacharyas. And then in terms of how the view of emptiness is generated within one's mental continuum, then you make the distinction. Then that's where the distinction of the prasangika versus svatantrika comes in. And again, what does that mean is that those who assert that it's possible to generate the view of emptiness by relying on a consequence, is a type of logical statement, a type of logical structure called a consequence. So if someone accepts that they're able to generate the view of emptiness by using a consequence alone, then they are a prasangika. Then someone who says that it's not enough to use a consequence alone, but you must absolutely rely upon a syllogism, or upon specifically a anyway, yeah, so normally it's just called the syllogism. So if you have to rely upon a syllogism in order to realize the view of emptiness, then that is a svatantrika madhyamaka, especially an autonomous syllogism, I guess you can say. So then we had earlier, now just go back to make sure I get the terms right, these different kind of ideas about ways of dividing madhyamikas. Particularly, we had this notion about their kind of different perspectives on ultimate truths, which I'm not finding. Sorry. Proponents of rationally established illusion, and then the proponents of thorough non-abiding. So that's not that's not relevant, or that's not an accurate, this distinction of madhyamikas, that way of dividing them. And then likewise, this understanding of, saying that Chandrakirti himself would be in line with the Vaibhashika or something like that. That's not accurate. So it's just these two distinctions that are relevant and accurate with regard to different types of madhyamikas. That's all.
Ona Lubin Teta Sui Jisu Dani, Papa Yapsi Gomba Tsul Nyamnas, Cho Chimbo Lubin Dawa Tabi, Lula Zo Zeba Nangwe, Jisu Dani, Damga Di, Lama Koma, Chimo Namjang, Ludila Zo Zimba Inus, Ta Karsungsna, Tadna Di Kondu, Da, Umabi Kebata, Gumulubi, Jesu, Tini, Naji, Lubin Papa Ladan, Tini, Dinima, Tini, Lubin Sanjang, Lubin Lindenchi, Ani Lubin Shibasu, Wada Dinima. 아니 가스나 집안에 나와 잡아라 수바더니마다 우마비 슌딘 마 쳬비 마 중문지 뭐 송수와 다 뒤나네 다 진짜 지당 날렌적이 쳬발라 다 벤도 뭐 슈총으로 왔디 다 뒤나네 우마비로 뭐 좋이네 쪼도야 타는데 다 진짜 제름지기 된다 라고나 꼬줘디와 어 뒤서 뒤나네 다 로벤도 누가 우마비 쳬바잖냐로 와서 다 뒤서기 슝 뒤서 나네다 동반이게 따와 뗄라 파면도 다 흉강의 제수 장례제 있습니다. 치와디 대당수와 대다 제수 장례 파바 옆에 공부 초와 인념 나스나 다 로변 디니마 방진이 아니 로변 상전자 렌덴제 따와 잡아다 시와서로 소바 디니마 방진이 여교 나니 다 공부루당 아니 로변 파발라기 공부디 만노바단 제투게 되게 다 동반이게 따와디다 공부루루기 동반이게 따와디 고고나 로변 수의 제수 장례 야가 요래다 공부 로변 수기 되네 흉라 때네 배절라 다 분하고 흉망부 좀으로 왔다 수 흉디다 말하고 무슨 내가 최초들이 있었나 다 조지반에 아대샤기다 나지 람림 기타 말하고 공투사 람림으로 왔다 람림 제게 조지반에 아대샤기 갈송스는 로변 다와 잡고 룩조 제바레 다 조지반에 아대샤기 아니 권한 되는지 인다디 람림 기타 딘다디 기부침부 람빌 다 딘리바 마시 송는데 다 오다가 대바집니다. 남기 수요디 맞대라 별 따와디 아니 가와라 콩들어서 반내 나와 접으로 쪼지기도 디난신진이 디 제수 장네 아니 람링기 템베다보다 말한소다 디 람링 라주나나다 인다디가르 기시 포도다 샤라와라 소고 모부지로 다 코나주고 이나양 람림다 디도와 당마디기 스나 람림 치모 디기 다 콩뚝사 와기고치 람기지 콩뚝사기 되니 라마 공마 아니 기시 포도와라서 코나주기 이나양 아니 공부 제기 반는 나와 룩도 쪼지기도 진짜 대제수 장에다 가스나 어디네 된다 따와 돈이기 따와디 때라 파와디다 초레 쓴다 대시디 잡아 가스나 다 반는 나와 잡아디 다든다 우마비 따와 때라 바베기 슝마 쿵뚜와이나 당아랑주 다 슝다 친중이다 강사야 쿵뚜이 빠네 따와 저기 슝디 다다 세쇼당 아니 자체쇼 고대쇼 찍고 와 빠네 따와 잡아게 되니 가서는 아니 고난 다지 조 나든지 조지게 된 디송과 가서는 돈이 관계 또지나 루루로마 다자이 내는 춘이 대바 통화이 있습니다. 조지게 되는 데니스 집에서 티나라 아니 반대 나와 잡아디 고물루기 되니 가서는 응으로 로마 이바디 티나라 룽데 다 오네와 다 룽데 봐오 티라드니 돈이기 되니 담 춘이 대바 통화디다 디 야슈들이샤 선 조지게 송 오 디인도 전에 반대 나와 잡아디 다 동반이게 되니 따와 때라파비 슝 랑슝당 신슝신이 변나 랑슝 우마주바당 우마주비 랑데스 신슝드니 우마자와셔라 우물루 제조 우마자와셔라 제와 아니 식세스니 대시 식세스죠 오두시니 다 도르수드나 반네 따와 잡아디 도당가 아니가 그 슝몽부 제르와 안디나 도이 초라다 우마주바당 우마주비 랑데 아니 우마자와셔라 제와 투수 슈크침부 다나신 당하게 초라이나 상어두바기 되니와 자주기 제와 드레세스 와다티베 상어두비 자주기 제와기 담아텔라 바고나 다 반네 다와 잡아기 제주기 드레세스들 콩두네 마시 오죠 다디 어떤 딘데제도 도당가 니가는 공랑이나 다지 개바 첨부 이바 마세 아니 냠네 두비 잔제베 똑바 통분이네와 나게 똑바에 침분이네더니 날렌다 나라다지 두다 뭐부터는 루주요래 와다 공랑지단 지금 나렌다기 니에바에 나래서 왔다 나렌다라더니 배 지 고랑 니에바 나도 아니 배 파주지라 바잡 아니 딘데 온 가서 파주그 지물 신이 지무티 아니 지무티니마 오마 쉬니 딘데 두다던데와 오늘신은 다 파주 오마 쉬어야지 파주 고라는 쇼로 와 이네 다 반대 다와 잡아 고랑 기타 파주도 강하다 니에바 나가 파주가 지라 파잡 아니 파주 지무티니 오마 쉬니 딘데 망라도스니 나렌다기다 딘데 망라 바초라도스니 오다 지 오마 닝구 쉬고 딘데기다 다 나신진이 나렌다라더니 니마다 지 막던데 용가라 아니 도이 싱길라더니 베 원래 싱기 우유기 딘데기다 제 차와 집두베기 딘데 주바 때네 오다 고랑 도당가 니가 개바이 봐마서 고랑야 똑바 첨부 되니 베 난주바 첨부로 와 되니 베 말아서 무슨 곰 두바 냠네 치긴 베야 똑바 토벌려 주고랑 다 고랑 잠비에 남주에 인수와 이제 반대 나와 잡아기 제수 반대 나와 잡아기 때라파비 빼자 뭐요라다 우마주바다 우마주바랑제다 우마 아니 자와셔라고 고물루 주죠 우마 자와셔라고 제와 우마 식세세죠 튼족이 제수 장니 다 동반이게 따와디 쳐와이나 다 딱다지 다 남자만한수 고역이 돈이게 따와디 양답을 시도를 편도요레스 인도전에 다 제르미지게 아니 마드시 자면데 디홀라다 돈이게 끼고 드시 자면데요 반대 따와 잡아고 슝조치니 다 드시 자기 이마디 가서는 람림 기드니 아니 라마주바 고마지 반대 따와 잡고 슝나 공두샤 조지 반대 아저씨 제 반대 따와 잡으라 공동이더니 동반이게 따와디 마 송도 스티시도 제르미지에 다가라니 서다 루디 조 지바 이누 그래서 어떤 송샤스
Master Chandrakirti saw that among the commentators on Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle way, following whom did those masters seek to understand what the noble Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Aryadeva intended? The great elder Atisha considered the system of the Master Chandrakirti to be the main Madhyamaka system. Seeing this, the great gurus of the past who followed Atisha in giving personal instructions on these stages of the path also took Chandrakirti's system as the main system. Then the question comes, when you had Nagarjuna with all these different people coming after him and these great scholars giving commentary on his teachings. So you had, for instance, first Aryadeva, and you had Buddhapalita, and Bhavaviveka, and you had Shantarakshita, and Kamalashila, and Chandrakirti, and these multiple, out of all these great scholars, who had composed the main treatises that are considered the primary ones that are the commentaries on Nagarjuna, then what is the one to follow? What is the one that is the most, essential one to follow, or that Tsongkhapa wants to follow here. In order to really establish and develop the clear understanding of this theory of emptiness, or this view of emptiness. What is the one to be followed? So that's the question, and to really get at the intent of Nagarjuna, what he really intended to teach, and to have the students understand, then we have to look at the what is the kind of most important, I guess is the word you could use, the text that covers the topic in the most that gives the topics of Nagarjuna's text the most let's say it, somehow that explains them in a way that elicits that profound and essential meaning the clearest. So that's the one that you have to follow. And so who is that? So Atisha himself discovered or identified that as being Chandrakirti. So Atisha, he considered, as it says, the system of the Master Chandrakirti to be the main one. And that's described in the text where he said that Chandrakirti really he really saw the meaning of Nagarjuna's treatises, and he saw the truth. He saw the truth. He saw the truth of the reality. So it's right in the text called The Two Truths by Atisha. So that's where he made this claim about Chandrakirti, and so that's why since Atisha really is the creator, the founder of this Lamrim text, right? He's the source for the material of the Lamrim, and so he's saying that Chandrakirti is the main Madhyamaka system to follow. So then Tsongkhapa, in following Atisha and writing this entire Lamrim Chenmo text, is also just keeping that exact position of Atisha on the to follow Chandrakirti. And so that's when Atisha was establishing the practices for beings of created capacity, just like the section that we're in now of this text. Then he again referenced Chandrakirti and used his explanations for to establish the view of emptiness. And so that's the so then when we have Chandrakirti's different texts, he had some that were his own, like his kind of solely his own compositions, and some that were others' compositions, meaning commentaries on others' compositions. So the ones that are his own compositions, the own text, Chandrakirti's own texts, that would be like Entering the Middle Way, along with its auto commentary, or the commentary composed by Chandrakirti himself on Entering the Middle Way. And then auto commentary just means that the author of the text composed the commentary. Then the text of others means the commentaries that Chandrakirti wrote on others' texts. For instance, the Prajnaparamita, the Clear Words, which was a commentary, is a commentary on Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the Middle Way, and then he also composed commentaries on, for instance, on tantric texts, for instance, on the Guhya Samaja Tantra. And so there's a text on the commentary on the Guhya Samaja Tantra called the Clear Lamp. The Clear Lamp. And so he composed, actually, he's really an incredible scholar that composed many texts on both Sutra and Tantra, and was highly realized practitioner. There's different kinds of anecdotes about the kind of amazing things he did. For instance, when he was a scholar of Nalanda, so he was in Nalanda, and he had drawn a picture of a cow drawn or painted or drawn a picture of a cow, and then he actually was able to milk that picture of the cow to get milk and give to the community, to the Nalanda monks. And then another thing he did was 막 the doi senge garecheso gare number doi senge
누가라다 막 근데 자고 치료비 막 어디 뭐 틴도 갈라다 막 저기 막 저 뭐지 도기 생기스 아니 생기들 대자 슈디 생기디 배면은 좀 무슨 원역으로 야지 나신 쟤네는 막도 좀 봐. 뭐 틴도 나기 또 봐도
so these are examples of how great tantric realizations he had by being able to perform these kinds of these feats. So another one he did was that when there was in the area around the monastery, around the Lambda, there is a war going on, and so the armies were battling, and so the master Chandakirti, he created a stone sculpture of a lion, but then he was able to make it so the lion actually, the sculpture, the stone lion, became animate, and actually went and acted like a lion and scared off the soldiers so that they wouldn't harm the monastery, and they ran away. So there are these feats that Chandakirti was able to perform, so as that exemplifies his realization, and he is a manifestation of Manjushri. He's a namtu or an emanation of Manjushri. So,
어두체 다디오드라 루빈 다와 차베니스 사실 대제 남기 나네 루빈 상제 장기 파바의 공바 용수 좀 잡아 시니스 루데시 조진 루빈 링덴지라 제기 당스 렉시 망부시 랑라 중세 미대바 나와 남라 순중의 파바의 공바 제와 제도 스타디가 송스는 다반년 다와 잡베로와 다 우마 다 공부루주기 다지 동반이기 따와데 마 제시 되니 자와셔라 우마 자와셔라 쿵두니 마 제시 장데 슝 간데지라 또was나 우마 자와셔라 그 대와 로베 상제적인 제조 대와 부다 빨리다 세저와 오다 로베 상제적인 제조 그 자식 대와티 아니 배 파바 공부루주기 공부다 투바이 바 베싱네 아니 로베 상제적인 루시샤 다른 거랑 공부 로베 상제적인 되니 공부루주기 우마 돈이 따와들라 벽수데 마누와 이바 시반낭신 오다 디제수다네 아니 대제수들이 로베 링덴지기 되는 슝 누zul아야 되니 가스나 렉비 차도 되니 디 로베 링덴지 슝나시체 다양 디나라 데스 공부 제수 미투바르와 아니 가스나 로베 링덴지기 랑주비 콩가 제와로 오 튼솔라 되니 각바 담니 다 도르수드나 아니 그 반네다와 잡아기 아니 그런 제수 장사들 로베 상지장기 아니 제와 부다빨리의 시송 돈이 우마 자와셔 기더니 공부되더니 마 제와 당디 돈이게 따와 캐네 오다 딘데시 공부 제당디 딘데시 돈이 대시 자와래 했는데다 다른다 로비 산제장 나빠네 나와 잡아니 다 인다 우마 탄주비다 다 가스는 다 개비 슝나니 다 슝츠도 도지로와 다 된다지 공부를 제수단에 안 로비 파발라요 로비 파워요 다 대제수 되니다 우마 탄주비 슝세가 되니와 탄주비 신다 소지 로베 산제장 대제수 다른 부제디 카스로 등에 반내다와 잡고 어떤 도우치는데 아니 반내다와 잡고 공부 제주도 탄주비 그 쪼어지니다 공부 제디네레스 어디 디수도
And I forgot to say from the previous explanation that the reason for following Chandakirti is because his commentary is the clearest. It explains the about emptiness and the comment from Nagarjuna's intent the clearest and easiest to comprehend out of all those other scholars. So now we're reading the next sentence. The master Chandakirti saw that among the commentators on Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle way, there was the master Buddhapalita who had fully elucidated what the noble Nagarjuna intended. So he commented on the Noble Nagarjuna's intended meaning, using his system as a basis. He also took many good explanations from the Master Bhava Viveka, while refuting those that seemed a little inaccurate. So then he, so looking at those other scholars that came after the Buddha, before Chandakirti, there was Buddha Palita, whose commentary is called the commentary Buddha Palita, the Buddha Palita's commentary, now available in English, just I think as of this year, an English translation. And so that's the main one that Chandakirti is following. At the same time, he takes Bhava Viveka's commentary and those points in it that are accurate, relevant, those, the positive aspects of it. He also takes some of those into his own commentary, but those points that Bhava Viveka made, which are not, satisfactory and that are not reasonable, he then refutes them. So he takes some of them but refutes others. So the main one that he's following, then the main basis for Chandakirti's own commentaries is the commentary Buddha Palita. And so there were also, other scholars that kind of came in this period before Chandakirti. So the very first was Aryadeva, a direct disciple of Nagarjuna, and then the Master Lopin Powell, who I believe his name is, don't remember the Sanskrit name for him, but I think it's something with an A as well. I forget. So Lopin Powell, and then you had Buddha Palita, Bhava Viveka. So there were other Madhyamika commentators before Chandakirti, and they sort of just got clearer. The commentaries got clearer over time. So Buddha Palita was very clear, and then Chandakirti came.
파바 엽색이 슝 체발라 체풀도 중과 통면나 디니 로베 산제 장당 스판된 나와 접이 제수 장네 파비 공부 때라 파바 차고 다 가르송으로는 다 제름지기로 다 고물루고 다 공부 루다 우미 루라 다 공부 제수 뭐마 두스마인데 다 타두나 다 제름지기 다마 관계 다 따와 촉 돈이게 따와 때라 파바다 따와 그뒤 촉다 공부 되게 하셨으나 로베 디니 쓴다 로베 산제 장당 아니 반년 다와 잡고 있더니 공부 제수디 다 다와 때라 법도 다와 배 풀도 중화배 다 약쇼들이 샤스 디 지름지 통네 인자다 지름지 디홀라다 인다 다와 때라 배 다와 제와서 다 많이 홀라 동니기 지시 잡는데 아니 로베 산제장나 반년 다와 잡고 있더니 배 슝시샤 지금 지시 자기 보다도 주님아 수는데다 진짜 디 sabje 나와 가리래 루루루게 되니 제와즈비 슝치다 중주스 마 쉔데 다 디데시들 레고 다고 지당 우마비 개바 먹부 중화를 왔다 중화르데 이내양 다 따와 있고지 양제 다 지름지랑 게 따와디 우마 탄주비 따와 이마디 다 딘주 슝다야 동네 다고는 아니 따와 된다지 지름지다지 따와 니에데다 루베 산제장배 지 뭐라도 시그널나 중네더니 제가 부다 빨리다 울라 샹네 되니 딘데기 다지 우미 따와 충루 주여와 어디인데 다 지름지게 당다 루베 산제장나 반난다 와주고 슝 쪼치니 다 삼루 따위 지바 치엔데 아니 디니 쪼치니 다마 디홀라 다 산니니와 부다 빨리다레 세라 소바 다나신 주발레스다 반네다 와타바 권유 슝 양세양스 장우 다디 가스나 동관이기 삼유 동니기 깨지 시엔데 다 물루루고 루기 다 공부 되게 개발 먹부 중원나니다 야쇼당 다배 교매와디 다 로베 산제자다 반년다 와트고 있더니 슝디 인상 티지수장 때라 파기 스타디 인지 가리가 뭐라도 가려하고 왔으나 다 우마바스에 간레레스 다 우마바라 낭세기 가주 중셨어 우마랑 주바다 탄주바 다 우마비 따와데 간레레스 다 디나네 우마랑 주비 따와 가리레 우마 탄주비 따와 가리레 다 딘다 디니니 나니 관계 아니 상화레스 다 지당 지용 전지 강아지 바르데 이내 다 야야 온고 놀리고 온게 다 시중화로 와 두다 시나네 두다 되니 배 상쇼로디 아니 우마부 두다 중화로 와다 우마부 두다라요 난세게 되니 우마 탄주바다 랑주비 두다 어디 따외고는 다 독슨 제용으로 와 인도전에 다 덴바주비 최 류즈만 매와 차지기 남셔 태바리 스나 우마바치 다 덴바 두바 메와 마세 랑싱기 두바야 뒤섬 요마레 로아 추덤지 랑싱기 마두바레 심 제시 잡용도 되는 우마 탄주베 따와서 다 디강라서 무단도에 어디 인도선다 도르수드나 다 강상 옹분는부 아니기 때문에 따와 베 때라 바보이나 동반이기 따와디 예고이나 어다 고물루기다 제수 장내다 슝제게 루비 산제제다 반내 나와 저 슝기든 제시기 랑싱기 마주비 따와디다 어다 따와 양제레 신도선이 다 지름지게 다나 신신이 다마 시기 다마 송내들와 오독슨 주dom점도
And then we have the final conclusion of this section. Inasmuch as the commentaries of Master Buddhapalita and the glorious Chandrakirti are seen to be excellent explanations of the texts of the noble Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Aryadeva, I will follow them in making determinations about what the noble Nagarjuna intended. This is the summary of this section here. So looking at how J. Rinpoche is explaining the history of Nagarjuna's commentaries on Nagarjuna and all these different scholars that came, and then summarizing that. So here he's really following the scholars of Buddhapalita and Chandrakirti. So that's the main one, because those are the ones that are the most excellent, the most flawless, the ones that explain the meaning of Nagarjuna's text the clearest. And so it's primarily going to be those ones that he's going to cite again and again, and also Aryadeva, and so he's in the following chapters, following the rest of the text, is going to be referencing them repeatedly. And so that outline itself here in this section, which is, the history, again, exact wording is the the history of commentary and Nagarjuna's intended meaning. So that it just makes sense that he would bring this into the text, right? Like he has to, it's sort of, there's a need for this section to come, because when he's going to be explaining about emptiness, about Nagarjuna's text and the meaning of them, then you have to look at these different points that come up. Well, who are the different madhyamakas? What are the different types of madhyamaka positions, and how many are there, and what was the stages and the history? So it's just natural that he is writing the section. And then when you're talking about emptiness, then and so again, in Tsongkhapa himself, looking at this history, he's especially referential to Buddhapalita, because the history of Tsongkhapa's own realization of emptiness is that when he had a dream, at one point he had a dream where Buddhapalita placed, or some, I don't know if it was Buddhapalita himself, but anyway, someone placed the text of Buddhapalita, this commentary of Buddhapalita, on his head in the dream, and then on awaking, he went and looked at the text and had the direct realization of it, or had the realization of emptiness at that point. So that's so again, that's like sort of Tsongkhapa's own history, and so then there's these different kinds of madhyamakas, because they're just like with the other paradigms, these other four philosophical systems, they're all presented because of the, by the need of the different peoples, different disciples, sort of strength of their intelligence, or the different degrees of again, the term really used is faculties, the sharpness of faculties. And so the faculty really referring to more than just intelligence, but sort of it's different strength of faculties of different people. So that's why you have these varying degrees of subtlety and profundity of views that are expressed, and these different stages. So in the Madhyamaka itself, there's the general meaning of someone who is a madhyamaka, a middle way person, a middle way follower, is someone who accepts that all phenomena do not truly exist, are not truly established, and yet there still are, it's still reasonable and appropriate to accept the functioning of agent and actions. But so that's generally, then the prasangika madhyamikas go even further to a subtler view and say, so actually all phenomena are not established by way of their own natures. They are not established by natures or within nature. So this is an even subtler perspective so that's why Tsongkhapa, in explaining emptiness, is going to be following this school system.
야, 다 도치. 다디 와라 죽은다. 숨바 동반이기 따와 텔라 비비 출라 니스. 대코는이나 주부 심바당 대코는이 텔라 파바 무에서 스타디 가스는 subject. 다디 가스는 여기 가리劳动기 초된 바세들 subject 숨으로와 장된다 되는 게 되는 수로 무에서와 아니 루루루기 되는 공부할 수 지들 중와 안 동반이기 따와 텔라 비비 니스는 다 따와 텔라 비비 subject 숨이와 나니 다 숨바 동반이기 따와 땅의 시에게 흉들라요. 다 낭제들라요. 섭지 니체. 대코난이라 주부 심바스나 동반이 동비 따와들라 주수 간데선 주고를 심바디 직체. 아니 대코난이 때라 봐봐. 다 딘데 주석이 동반이기 따와 묘디더니 때라 봐봐. 섭지 니 디체를 당나도 흉침을 딘데 고를 계지 딘데 동니 이제 시에도 섭지도 때에서로 샤와이나 투구 말이야. 아지 남주에 관해서도 신의 공을 하동 공수도 그런 subject 고 뭐 그런 가도 방진 줘야죠. 다 흉게 되나 말로 좀 지긴 된다게 지기나 subject 롭들 중에나 투구 말이 된다 나올라 디가도 이만도 되는 고인으로와 아니 흉침으로 좀 지도 subject 또 자니 도투아이나 근데 낭도 투구 말이 subject 나라 고면스 제로와 디지털이 디 낭도 딘다스는 남상 올라샤인서 다 도우지는 게 된다디 대권은이나 주부지 바스디 동이 동비 따와 여러 들라 주부지 바디 시에디시 아니 대권은이 때라 파와 다 대권은이 된데와디 아니 마 시중의스도 다 대권은이 동반이기 따와들 다 디지당 디가 둘라더니 지당 숨과 시두수더니 동이와 람두기더니 동이 아니 제두기 동이 시람 제순스와 다시 아니 우마 람 우마 제부 우마 스니 숨기 시작하고 그래서 다 시두기수 아니 장신의 마주기 동반이디 시우마치 다 람두수 티토비더니 따와디 공고도 아니 람 우마치 다 텔라 때네 제부 아니 가리래 지금이 바자다 제바 빵비 최고 디신이 도보어와 어디 제부 우마서다 독신이 다 디고도 인자 대코난이나 주고 심바 세나라 다 디수미 시작하고 그래서
And then we'll begin the next chapter. So now chapter 9, the stages of entry into reality. So now the outline is the subsection is number 3, how to determine the philosophical view of emptiness. In the subsection A, the stages of entry into reality. How to determine the philosophical view of emptiness. This has 2 parts, the stages of entry into reality, the actual determination of reality. A, the stages of entry into reality. Question, Garjana is the reality one seeks to, nirvana is the reality one seeks to attain. But what is nirvana? If entry into reality means a method for attaining it, then how do you enter? So actually, we really just went through the outline itself so far. So the outline, it's very important to actually have a sense of what the outline is, have it be able to appear in your mind clearly, to be able to not get confused and lost in a text. So in general, if we're going to do, the actual serenity meditation and insight meditation, then you can just kind of go straight into it and meditate. But in terms of going through a particular text, then it's necessary to have a sense of the outline, so you know where in the text you are, and you're able to kind of get the point of the section of the point of what's being stated, and have it, so you have it kind of know where to place it within the overall text. So here the outline again, we had these three sections. First of the prerequisites for practicing insight, right? Within the section of the prerequisites for practicing insight, there is the section on distinguishing between the definitive and the provisional meaning, scriptures. And then there was the section on this history of commentary on Judaism's intended meaning. And now here's the third of the preliminaries for insight, how to determine the philosophical view of emptiness. And so within this, then you have the two sections. As one is just the stages of entry into reality, and then the determination of reality. So the stages of entry means how do you start to enter into this view of emptiness? How do you start to engage with this? You could say engage, you can say enter. How do you start to engage with this view of emptiness? You have this discussion about, entering into or engaging with reality. What is this, this reality? So here they talk, reality here is talked about in terms of the basis, path, and result. So there's these three kind of within this reality: basis, path, and result. And so here the basis refers to the actual nature of the emptiness, which is, the emptiness of establishment by way of nature, the emptiness of it being established by nature. And then you have the path, which is the consciousness, realizing that, the realization of that basis. And then the result is the, result, which is the separation or freedom from the obscurations and their the imprints, the obscurations and the imprints of the obscurations. Again, like Dribusana. So the which again is the result that is obtained, or the result which is attained after meditating on the path middle way. So again, this is here is basis, path, result is the basis middle way, or the basis middle path, the path middle. It's just maybe the middle basis, middle path, and middle result.
와도 도체 다 당분이 들 토바첩이 대권난이 양해를 대바니 강인 대토바첩이 탑 대권난이라 주방 진다식이고는 주방이 냠나스 치당 난기 최나조바 대권난이 마인신도 대권난이도 나와 디탐제 바자단 제바 니와 시외스 다당 다게 진비 나바 탐지도 세바니 디 토바첩이 대권난이 주고 스타디 가스나 디 남도 가스나 다 디 동반이기 되니 그래서 따와디기로와 때네 아니 토바 차야기 톱지하기 되니 제부 아니 양을 대바서도 다 윤대 타도데 가리레스 다디 디 톱지기 아니 동반이기 되니 따와라 죽수당 동반이기 따와디 간르지 샤워레스 오다 디게지 시는데 다디 하고와이나 땅나도 그래서 동반이기 따와디 다 오늘 내가 전부 휴지를 샤 섬무디로와 디기 치와도 좀 내디 야부지 하고나 다들 지와 땅도와 어디 지와 아니 딘들 지와들 렌드 야고 지가서 고초와 있는 다 오늘 동관이기 따왔을 때 오늘 계시모르샤 디 동니 되가는 주다 지금 소소랑라 펜도 용하게 되는 오늘 따와 투도 중어지르샤 선바지라더니 말아서 네반이네 딘데 따와 중났으면 선무도 슈추를 그래 펜도 거 디인도서는 다 된다 토바치비 톱자디 동반이기 따와디 고음네 톱자디 가르도 그랬으나 치당 난게 최다 치루와 치료와 규규 마두비 치료비 송다 치료를 잘라 소바 치기 좀 먹어요와 다나신 거라서 남기도 옹벌라 소바 시스템나 소바다 만아서 기부 가서 낭치다 낭스도 뒤에 당 만아서 심진기 다 규규 마두비 치료라 통역이 송다 치료를 지신다 치료기 이제는 여기 닫고 봐 우주여와 어디서 치치 다 낭스도 당 만아서 심진기 다 그런저고 셰비 신교기 미기 나제 루이신다 아니 루이라 소바고 진짜 낭다 치당 낭기 최 간대지네 되도 강가 태권한이 만신도 스나 랑신기 루와 되는다 봐 아니 루와 랑신기 두바 만신도 아니 그런저라 태권한 때 두바지 난거 다 낭윈 추낭 디 탐제 어디 나와 나신 거라 징게요리 진비 진바 딘징디당 아디 낭윈 나와 디네 디 박셔단 제바 디네 베 싸면도 침비로 왔다 니월시 와서 베 때니 베 매와 침비 차지 시베 다당 다기 왔지만 남바 탐도 세바니 다 다당 다기 왔은 다 아니 가스나 가스나 강사게 당진 다기 와라 디니 마 최니 디니 최기 당진 다 돌수도나 강사게 당진당 소리 아니 강사게 당진당 최기 당진 딜라 땜비 아니 추낭 로와디니 박자단 제바 아니 베 니부도 짬에도 침비도 때니 시비 아니 시바딜라 아니 갑디 토백이 제부 아니 추구 디레스 딘데 디레스로 어디 제인데다 딘데 왜다 가랑 주다 둔다 바 타르 무슨 다 가랑 주다 동안 나바 나서 지 연구하러 왔다 와 동안 나바 나서 용액이 주디 가지래 주디 짬에도 조조 동안 나바 나서 짬에도 치마이나 땅 가랑 주 대고 용액이 말아 땅 가랑 주 밑에와 용액이 동안 나바 나서 주 연구해서 다 가두 용다 가와 용다디 하고 와 다베 양도 기네베 개와가지 재능에는 개와 멍부지 균이다 개와 통화매반의 용화를 다른 모든 용화 다 되게 주당 제발 싸워니는 용도 매와 차야지 용어 다베 때문에 들어와 다 동에 주당 제발 되니베 동에 주 박자다 제발 왔다 다 도르수드나 아니 유모바당 시지지 바더니 말류바 다 시와지 토변디 아니 초구 토바서 어다 디 시와디 그때는 저부 추구 무슨 추구 타도 디래 어다 디 갑디 되니 가서나 토바 자야기 냥데 디래 어다 디 저와 당불 현대리샤스
So now we actually just started the actual text here. Question: Nirvana is the reality one seeks to attain, but what is nirvana? If entry into reality means a method for attaining it, then how do you enter? Reply: the reality that you seek to attain, the embodiment of truth, is the total extinction of conceptions of both the self and that which belongs to the self, specifically by stopping all the various internal and external phenomena from appearing as though they were reality itself, which they are not, along with the latent predispositions for such false appearances. This view of emptiness is something which is extremely important, and then there's a certain result that arises from meditating on this view of reality. And so it's also that's why it becomes very important, why emptiness becomes important, because of the result that it creates. And so then what is the way of engaging with this view of emptiness, and how do you enter into it? And that's this view, is essential then to understand. And once you see how essential it is to understand it, then you get to be kind of motivated to generate the view of emptiness and achieve that result. What is that result? Well, so here it's talking about, the result here, that's in the question, right? What is that thing that's the result? This nirvana, it's the result of meditating on emptiness. So it's interesting that it just says in the English nirvana, but the reality one seeks to attain, because it's more I guess clear in the Tibetan that it's referring to like the end result of having done something. The phrasing itself, it's sort of anyway, but the meaning, it's all there. The reality one seeks to attain. So so then what is that? But the way it was explained was just talking about more this some result, something that's a result, that's something which is attained. And so this thing that's attained, again, here is talking about how you're stopping all the internal and external phenomena from appearing as though they were this the reality itself. And what does this mean, the external and internal things? So external things are those which are not contained within the continuum, the mental continuum of living beings. So external visual form, sound, smells, taste, tactile objects, of those external physical objects. And then internally, there's internal phenomena, those which are sort of, contained within or somehow, contained within the consciousness of sentient beings, of living beings. So that's like the body, speech, and mind, and so on. And so all these phenomena, even though they are not established by way of nature, they appear to be that itself. They appear to be reality. They appear to be that itself. And so this is what you, and the result that is attained, the thing that's attained, it's completely pacified, beyond pacification. It's thoroughly pacified. And as here it says, again, specifically by stopping. So it's stopped, it's completely pacified. And then it talks about the self and that which belongs to the self. Now, the self here is talking about the selflessness of persons, and that which belongs to the self is talking about selflessness of phenomena. So those two kinds of selflessness are described here as the result that is attained. And in this explanation of the result that is attained, you have this understanding where there's these two selflessnesses, selflessness of persons and phenomena, and essentially the result, really, what is it? It's these confused and mistaken appearances together with their imprints are completely pacified and eliminated. So here it says stopping, right? So they're stopped, ceased, eliminated, pacified. And so again, what's the whole point of this, talking about this result? Because there's a huge variety of different kinds of suffering. There's an immense variety of different kinds of suffering that we experience. And it's, if you accept past and future lives, then it's started, there's all sufferings experienced from beginningless time, from time immemorial, from lives without beginning. And so then there has to be this kind of understanding that, well, the causes are, what causes all the suffering. We have afflictions and the two obscurations, the afflictive obscurations and cognitive obscurations. So those two obscurations, have to be completely, again, we have to be completely freed from them, or with all the afflictive and cognitive obscurations without exception, need to be pacified. And so this is this end result, the pacification of all those obscurations. And that's also called the Drebul Chuku, which is here it says the embodiment of truth, but usually it's like it's really the Dharmakaya result, the resultant Dharmakaya. That's like a kind of maybe a more technical way of translating it. The resultant Dharmakaya. Here it says the embodiment of truth. This one.
Oh yeah, that was it. That you want to take on the niche that you be Japanese. Tango Kowe Nigun Samni is Sundays, Tela Tordu Kebashi goes. Tene did you Malona Mitoba Tony, Kowe Zawa Kain Yamdi, Zawa Zejenes, Chita Mariba, Kowe Zawa Dulu, La Neva Ding Tabane Trones, Teponga Dubi, Juma Maiba Kebashi goes. That in the decals was not that Domani Tawala, the Lojang Dirwa. That Tony Tawala Lojang, that countries in the Zimbabwe countries. 다 당부 민중의 로장이로와 당부 코위 되니 가리래 예바 되니 차소 유무바당 대라 때는 중요하게 되니 가서는 개가 나치기 동해로 왔다 가라서 개비 동해 나비 동해 시비 동해 다 개비 경고 차이 동해 다 동해 나바 나서 중고 다 동해게 동해 교회 동해 잡아두지 계속 강가 다 양의 양도 용거 다 가라서 어디 이 순한 개용도 다뒤 동해 나바 나서도 믿어봐이나 다 딜라티니 도덕 로지 정신이 깨운 거와 깨우게 뒤께나다 동해디 동해기 주디 아니 가리래 어디 좀 맞아와 있는 동해디 다 믿어와 있나요 다 동해디 양도 용거 다 용디 다 동해딩에 nga kaduina nga be midewa suyodo 다 동하게 주대 가리래 쓰더니 동하게 주더니 야 동인도 코에 자와 쓰더니 직다 말이 봐 직다 했더니 가서나 nga 스네로와 나랑 드니 가서나 어 랑싱기 마주발라 랑싱기 주바 로루 파르다 좀제데 유딘의 주와 요마데 나랑조라 가리샤고래 nga 스빌 남성 유딘의 흔히 주바지 시작되고 시와는 신은 진고 진발할 때는 아니 로와 차존 유무즈게 유무들할 때는 아니 레게와 근데 미게와다 간다 도르수드나 되샤셔다 티무스 끼에네 티 원게티니 레 두자사네 티레 소소 사주 레들할 때는 아니 소소 동의 용고와데 레고 다 방림디 디젠도 다 동의 문제스나 동의의 규칙 제주지 동의의 규칙 제주 제기 자와디 당진 다 당진 내가 써야라 아니 당진이 시험에 봐 동의도 불러지면은 다 조사요 말 어디 인도전에 다 동의도 따와지 깨고도 수미들 안신게 슈마도 깨는 거래 인도전에 대고는 이나 주고 싶어 세다 방림디다 소수등도 상모 땅내와 아니 코비드니 코알라 깨기드니 말한수다 유 가르쳐도 코에 날 되나 못이면은 강에 가르는 것도 다 뒤나서 상모 땅에도 다 님고 중세 잡면도 수는 다 말한수 벨 레다 니모 원기 로메 받게 사회제라 다 동안 용에도 춘이샤 다 되네 동안에 아니 얘기 다 마음의 치동에 다른 무튼이 섭섭집니다 아니 가르려다 뒤주 니모도 충도 땅에 탑시 맞춰버리나 동에도 무튼이 말하라 용도 삼모 땅인데 아니 니모도 충도 땅에 탑시들라 아니 니모기 싸와 아니 배나서 신동기 되어와 신동기 싸와디 매봤으나 아니 신동 야가 깨와 매와 차기와 마도 신동 끼로지 야가 조는 신동 양자 이제 게임 거라 뒷나시 신의 거랑서 줄라 또 신동기 싸와 나신 거랑서 동안 나빠 용이 싸와디 당신 직다디 다 직다디 간제지래 스미삼모 땅는데다 아니 직다기 오당 직다기 내수도 다 디월 제시 잡는 거 직다스나 나 세디랑 신주바 증에 다팀 증에 로디 매와 소야라 랑신 마두바 통행이 돈이도 따와디 메타메바시 어디 두 지리는 돈이도 따와라스니 심슈치로 줘야기 되네 레탄디 오다 짐바 딘데지레 스디 송도 우스
The stages by which you enter that reality are as follows. First, you having contemplated and dismayed the faults and disadvantages of cyclic existence, you should develop a wish to be done with it. Then, understanding that you will not overcome it unless you overcome its cause, you research its roots, considering what might be the root cause of cyclic existence. You will thereby become certain from the depths of your heart that the reifying view of the perishing aggregates, or ignorance, acts as the root of cyclic existence. You then need to develop a sincere wish to eliminate that. This view of emptiness. Now, how is this view of emptiness developed within the mind? How to train your mind in the view of emptiness? Well, first, it begins by developing renunciation. So this determination to be free of cyclic existence. And so to do that, you see that the cyclic existence has, all these kinds of suffering in it, that there's the suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, suffering of dying, before birth, aging, sickness, and death. And that there's this limitless, this variety of sufferings that occur in cyclic existence. And we don't want suffering is something that we it is an undesirable thing to have. And yet these types of suffering occur again and again, repeatedly. And so if eventually, or, in developing renunciation, then we have a sort of, getting a sense of disapproval, a sense of that they're extremely irritating and annoying, extremely yeah, I guess that's a good enough. There's this sense of them being extremely, we are annoyed with them. So then you develop a desire for liberation, desire to be free of this suffering from the cycle of existence. And what is then the thing that underlies the cycle of existence and the suffering that we experience? What is the cause of the suffering? So when you look at the cause of suffering, then we see that it is this the root of cyclic existence, which is this view of the perishing collection. So the view of the perishing collection, which is here also called the view of the perishing aggregates. And so the view of the perishing, the Tibetan phrase, a lot of phrases in Tibetan are sort of condensed multiple syllables into sort of a shortened phrase. So it's just the view of the perishing, we call it. View of the perishing. So the view of the perishing is this root of cyclic existence. And what is that? How do you identify that? It's this the I, me. It's the me, which is this appearing extremely vividly and brightly in the mind. It has the sense of appearance of I, of me, the feeling or the appearance of me, and then grasping or apprehending it to be actually the way it appears, to be existing from its own, existing as established within nature, existing, being as if it were established within nature. And so from this very brightly appearing I, this feeling of me, then we also give rise to the afflictions, attachment, aversion, delusion, the three poisons. From those, then actions are done. We accumulate or perform actions, which are karma, right? Action means karma. And so those then lead to suffering. So the root of all the suffering was this grasping at a self, right? Grasping at a self. And so this grasping at a self, it must be pacified. And so without the view of emptiness, without the realization of emptiness or the view of emptiness, it cannot be pacified, because again, it's this sense that this I that strongly and vividly appears exists or is established by way of its own nature, by way of a nature. So without the view realizing that the self is empty of nature to combat it, to pacify it, then it won't be pacified, it won't be eliminated. So there's no way we can achieve our goal of eliminating suffering, of achieving this result that we want, without the view of emptiness. That's the essential point here. And so then we start to see, again, developing renunciation, desiring liberation. You think carefully about, okay, so what are the causes of my suffering, and what is the suffering? When we understand this cause of the view of the perishing, then what kinds of problems does it create for me, and how does it create those problems? So you think about all of these things very carefully, and when you do that, you start to see, oh, I have to be extremely careful in my in what I do. I have, if I'm not careful, then it will just continue to create suffering for myself. And if I do not reduce the afflictions, I do not reduce these afflictions, it will just continue to result in suffering. And so you see this, that this is the situation we're in. And it's similar to the example or analogy of a tree. If you want to eliminate and get rid of a tree entirely, completely, then without cutting out the roots, removing the roots, there's no way that you can actually get rid of it. It will continue to grow back again. You just cut it at a different place. So that's similar to this situation. We have to eliminate this root of samsara. So,
yeah. 다 주스 게다 자시자. 지워질려 나. 지워질 고속이 떨어진 뒤에 잠자기스. 다 지워질 고속이지.
So now we'll stop going through the text here, because it's 8:30, but if there are any questions, then we have time for a question and answer. So please bring your question, please ask your questions.
I have a question.
Let's Yeah, Sean, go ahead.
I was going to say you choose. Okay, thank you. So I just want to connect this back to the previous section on serenity. So we can gain by talking like this a pretty strong intellectual understanding of emptiness, but being that we've been going through cyclic existence for so many lifetimes and having this I'll call it an experience of the view of the perishing aggregates. So it seems we really need to, the intellectual understanding isn't enough to eliminate the view, that we have to experience it, right? And so it seems it would be, and this is in line with the teaching, I believe, that it'd be impossible to be able to experience emptiness without first being able to focus the mind in such a way that we could go that deep. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're asking. Are you asking if the question makes sense or the meaning makes sense?
The meaning.
Well, I don't know what Genla well, let me ask Genla. Right?
And maybe you can word it better than I did. That's fine if you understand the question, I think.
Yeah, yes, I understand the question. Right. Yes, I think so. Oh, I'll try. Okay. Genla, do you 당gengi 단다 Geshe di dang nartibe 신에기 남샤 di dang 저지 간다섬로 동기 예매지 그디 공 도바다고 치사기도 아니 신의 결정부 잡고 통이도 간사나 동반이 이꼴라지 코어 롭스 지 the ropes like 말에는 지다 다제 디세나티사레다 도배왕이 도배왕이 지나 지 도배기 고와 야보지 라소나 아니 디 다동가서 지다 지속이 따와라 규ren보지 영화 슈창보지 차대여 연장 아니 동리라 지 도배로이 고와지 라바 예나양 다나 동반이 영화 슈창보 깨투기 말와스 제정 동반이라 영화 직단서 이 도배로데서라 도박이 동반이 이거라 하고는 즉 야보 쉐바에나 양 영화 깨투기레베 동반이 동반이 영화 영화 깨투기레베 야마나 신의 담보 즉 땡에진 다점 제직도 샤바 근데 엔지미지 고그레베스 네 동반 영화계 관계를
다든다디 동반이 기콜라다 뭐다 영화계 맞으시디 수수 심기 땡도와 수수 심기 땡니 아니 동반이 공지 때지 모두 대시 잡시와 주불라 동반이 영화 요가 쓰고 말했어. 그래서 동반이 낭비 취급이 따르고라 대시 제가 남바 마인게 다베 타바토니 로당으로 다 지금 인중 같은 속 선물 지에 매행게 지시 잡고 그걸로 변하나로 그런데 나변나 가스나 도로로 칸나라다 낭비 취어라 지시 작행기다 뒤는 망부지 내고로 뒤열대 이내 그 취에디 취에서디 심기 통이야 조고행기 남샤들라 아니 공지 때나 아니 영화 따원 돈이기 따져 지시 잡아 좀 많이 맞지 가스는 돈이기 따와디 소소비 셈나 때니 야 소소비 땡이 뉴모디 충도 줘야 탑시라와 소소비 땡이 뉴모지여와 어디 충도 줘야 그 탑시디라 돈이기 따와디 파 오저치 도와지와 동반이기 따와디기 시심발라 때니 소소비 충규 차돈 몽숨 되네 강사 당진 어디 좀 윤도 줘야 그 심바지 고추 투고여나 다 돈이기 따와라 아니 냠용 다 가다라다 냠내기 강리비 다 디레스 다 딘데 제일 다 딜라 신년 세당 타동선수 다른 예벌도 고에 와. 다 신년 톱네. 나변 디어라 돈이 변하라서 퇴중이 싫어. tabu tongni sura gu te tijila samjung ge tela pa tuwa tongni sine dindere shasa ta ti gomni sine tongni ge tawa da nyamyong tewe tene gomjung ge shara gu du sine gomyong tene shine gu shine ge tene mipa la tene de kasna lysim chingcheng ge dewa te tu lysim de su ru cha yu tene chadong ge cheba chege 아니 돈이기 되나 제바치니 오두신 다시라 순리게 띵엔진데 되니 야 창조 승기 지심바 년중 창조 승기 지심이 돈에니 야야야야야 저디 아니 소수주 당진 뭐가당 두두 년도 줘야겠다 답으면 제 두고 하지 뒤치도 돈년도 배 따와라 신에다 활동게 되니 냠년디 예버도 고야래스 와 돈이야 공부도 좋아 돈년도 배 따와 그 돈이 똑바 좀 많이 받지 돈이 따와 되게 랑주기 니모 총도 줘야게 탑시들라 다 신에다 활동이 쓴거 예버도 쓴 거래스 어디제도 신에다 활동기다 냠년디 요바 점기 돈이 따와 고알리면 예봐요 말 돈이 따와 동관이 또 따와 요바 점기 신에다 활동이 뒤유비 예봐요 말 가서는 섬중이 시럽 내가 되나와 어 섬중이 제바지어와 뒤에서는 돈이 또 요때 돈이 또 따와디 냠내라 캐디 다 신에다 활동 지스 가지고 다 뒤야 공부도 줘야 되라 아니 창조성이 고워 어 누제도 되는 가서 라문가 봐 실리아 마신 조람 통신 다야 줘야죠와 어 짐바디 딘데진 고주고 그래스 어 딘데지 돈이다 돈이기 따와 동반이 그런 마시 제시 잡시와 주고 돈이기 따와 유비니 봐요 말해스 등에 딘데지 상도 어디 되시디
So then there's a few things going on, and yeah, okay, so I'll just start by saying that when we talk about an experience of emptiness, this is something occurring within an individual's mind. So it's something within a mind or on the basis of a mind that you are able to identify whether or not there is an experience of emptiness. So it's an internal, something that has to be observed through introspection internally. And there's, the way to really gain this experience of emptiness is in reliance on habituation, familiarity over time. So simply having the capacity to explain emptiness, to explain emptiness, that is not itself evidence of having in this internal experience of emptiness. We can think that there's people who are not even Buddhist who maybe are professors, and maybe they're from another philosophical system, or some kind of teacher or university scholar or something, and they can talk about emptiness and explain it, but they might not have this internal experience. So what's the way to really determine if this experience is in your mind is by looking and, again, remembering, right? Emptiness is the method for reducing and reducing afflictions, right? It's the method for making the afflictions less powerful and reducing them. So when you look within your mind stream and your mental experience, and if you see that your own afflictions are getting diminished, are being reduced in number and strength, then that's the evidence that you are generating experience of emptiness. And so that's what it is, right? That's the sign in your own experience. And when you talk about now the practice of serenity and insight, so here these are needed, yes, for sure. They're needed to really deepen and increase this realization of emptiness and the power of your realization of emptiness. Now, when you talk about, I'll just make a note, because it's sort of hard to kind of bridge the gap between this just kind of our way of thinking about it as English speakers, but using this term intellectual understanding, there's not really a direct equivalent that I'm aware of in Tibetan, but instead there's a sort of alternate way of thinking about different types of knowledge, or the process of generating deepening knowledge, and that's in terms of the 3-part process of hearing, thinking, meditating, right? So that's not directly equivalent, but I'll just, instead of using the word intellectual, I'll just say how Genla explained it. So you have, you can have, again, this wisdom arising from learning or hearing, first level, and that's again, at that stage, there's no guarantee that you've actually have some experience of emptiness at all, or a realization of emptiness at all. So that, but you still have the kind of basic, understanding of it. And so then there's the level of wisdom that arises from contemplation. Now, this is actually the realization of emptiness. So this is the inferential, reliable cognizer, a pramana, right? An inferential pramana, reliable cognizer, which realizes emptiness. But that realization of emptiness also is, because you have that realization of emptiness, then that's not yet necessarily that you have this experience. When we're talking now about this, your question about the experience of emptiness, that's now, again, what arises through greater familiarization and habituation. So then you have the realization of emptiness from the wisdom arisen from reflecting, contemplation and reflection. And then by putting your mind on that object of observation, emptiness, and keeping that in your meditation as the observed focal object. And then you have, through, like, as you heard the teachings on Serenity, that you develop the ability to generate the physical and mental, the bliss of physical and mental pliancy by focusing on emptiness. Then that's going to be, right, going through the stages of serenity. And then finally, when you do that, generate the bliss of physical and mental pliancy by focusing on emptiness, then that's actually insight at that point. And so you generate insight, and then you're able to, so insight's generated. Anyway, it comes after that happens. That's serenity, but insight comes after that happens, and then that allows you to develop, this kind of deeper experience. And then you generate, in addition to that realization, the bodhicitta. That's now you've entered onto the path of accumulation, and then continue to develop this meditation. So it is necessary to continue to develop the view of emptiness using serenity and insight in order to really, completely, to seriously reduce and then completely eliminate your afflictions. So that's why you develop that meditation and go through the path of path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and eventually the path of no more learning. So again, it's just to recap, that simply having this wisdom arisen from hearing or an understanding of emptiness isn't a guarantee that you have a realization of it. And having a realization of emptiness through an inferential, reliable cognizer is not a guarantee that you have this experience of emptiness, with the meditation of serenity and insight.
That's a very helpful explanation. Thank you. Tukche Geshe.
Oh, teach.
May I ask a question? If emptiness is a personal experience, and can that be shared with other people? Feeling is a personal one. How light it is. If we talk about it with each other.
Am I hearing it? Oh, we got it written. Good, thank you. If emptiness is a personal experience, can that be shared with other people? How can we talk about it with each other? Okay, again, na tomba ni nyongwa di semgi dengdu. Shi yoba yenzang, yoba yenas. Ani tasoze that parts or tomba ni gola kandas parts or Geshe to get it. Ani chi mishanda laten to get it. That's all. This young get it. Semgi dengdu yenzang. Tomba nigi nyongwa di sem, but tomba nigi nyongwa sergi midu morangi tomba ni sergi doa tomba ni sengi dengdu yezang ani mi shanda la part gandas tun to get it gandas Geshe to get it Geshe gandas to get it sengi dengdu yoroa Nangi Sam getting to Yura, Tombani. And Tombani non sang getting to Yin, Yana, any me shanda la part Ratut can this chit, Ratut took it.
그래서 더 동반이 수수 고메디 샘딩도 공부 있는 신다라 지시 그래서 잡투에서 원래 샘딩도 여러 왔더니 신라 건드선 지시 잡아서 원래 그다 가래. 그게 정말 세월을
Inside it, the Sam getting to the inside Sam getting to Rangi Yongwa. Oh, Rangi Yongwa, it told her, she's on Rangi Yongwa, the Mishanda, like I'm just done to get it.
알레 단 온이기 따와디 소소기 셈기 동라 베이 쿵의 신비 쓴는 온에 다 좋아 베 요비 통이 된데기 냠용 레바이나 다디 냠용 간데 요와 나신 냠용 간데스 계속 제로 계단에 강가 수수하고 그러와 다디 다 신달아 시에 레로 차대로 다 동이기 따와 고아 메와 있는 신라 자야디 제시 자야디 대외자 데스 깔아가리고 다 소소 땡들어와 동반이기 따와디로와 냠년 대군에 있으면 초합에 약부 유와 땡니 오늘 당내 동반이 세대 강사랑 마주바래도 나도 마주바래도 왔어 나도 주바지면 어디에 배 추나래도 왔어 나도 짐바라 때네 아니 뭐가 깨기도 왔어 전족이 다담 동닉이 다 로죠 나도 주바디 짐비 로디 아니 소소 풍주고요 봐 와, 다 디라 때네 뭐가 깨와 차소 뭐가 디라 때네 동안 나바나서 되기도 다 디인도 전에 동반이 세대기 나도 마주바 와다 랑신이 마주바 동네 와다 랑신 마주바디 동용도 아니 소소 랑신 마주바 또 따와디 기루 계단다 튼소 소소라 가지기 소소기 셈땡도 초낭 대화다 진조를 야 공부도 좋아하시 아니 디셔라 디시자 대례자 내가 누레스 나 지와 렌직들도 야 동네디 셈땡라 요래니 신다르시 가르쳐 버렸으니 대화 치고 세우 지제는 동네디 추담지 땡도 요러 와 와 치어 탐지기 땡도 요래 셈지고 고민도 다 소소기 셈땡도 되는 동반이 따와야 고민스 걸면도지 뭐도지 소소기 셈지부 땡도 요래서 뭐 말했다 싫으나 랑싱 마주비 차완선 시두제기 땡도 동반이 따와디 동반이 세디 여발 그와 시두나 줄 땡도 되는 돈이 여비 차다 저서 생이나로 어디제인데 디제시 자야디 고 딘데스 고디 개부지디 요만하다 대시 된다 여기 나와나시 돈이 대시리 딘데스 고 대시 잡는 거 딜라강이 개는 거 말. 다 소소 셈나 요한 낭싱이 싫어 대시 자야디 깔아가고 자고. 얘네 소소 셈나 가주 영용 치와이와 대상기 근데 대시 자야디 렐라로 두고. 와 어디마도 지기 돈이 지다와시도 돈마도는 대시 자야디 깔아가고. 와 인다디 말씀 주면 나라 돈이들 한 말씀 주면 싫어 바로 지와 돈이 돈반이디 아니 자이 지다와시도 주면 봐. 또배 지다와시도 또 민용에서 냠샤 수소랑을 비시 코니 파보의 강사교 때문에 지다와시도 동인데 파바모도 요만해서 현재 가서는 돈이 무슨 또 냠샤 이시지 뭐다. 와 어디게 돈이 아니 다 마모도 지기 돈이 무슨 도 마도배 강사기 다 동반이 대시 자와시네 대시 다고 딘데라오시모도 지기 이 큰게시도 잡투에 깔아가고 쳐야 돼요. 어디 인도서는 동반이 고난을 민들라 말씀 좀 드는 라보레스 어디 내려오시다 당.
So so there's two answers to give here, depending on really what the intent of the question was. It wasn't completely clear, but so the first question really being, how does someone explain about emptiness, given that, the experience of emptiness, their meditation on it is something that occurs within their mind. And so here it's that a person who has experience of emptiness, they're able to explain it based on the experience, because they know how was it that they arrived at the view of emptiness, what were the causes, what led to their understanding. They're able to, they know how they developed the view of emptiness, so they can explain that to others as well. And in fact, the deeper their experience of emptiness grows, the easier it will be for them to explain about it to others. Whereas someone who doesn't have a realization or an experience of emptiness, will be very difficult for them to explain it to others, because they don't have that experience. And so again, you see, someone who's realized emptiness and has an experience of it, they see, okay, the grasping at a self, grasping at grasping the self and grasping of the person. That's self-grasping is a confused, mistaken appearance, or a mistaken, it's a mistake, something that's confused. So that confusion is what gives rise to afflictions. So they see that that's what the process, and that these afflictions give rise to the suffering. And so that the realization of the phenomena and the self being not being established by nature, that's what pacifies these afflictions. And so, they have this understanding that that is the the meaning of emptiness, and that's sort of how they see the emptiness as having that role in their mind. So then the second, so basically the answer being, the more experience of emptiness they gain, the easier it is for them to explain it. They understand, exactly how it functions, how it leads to reduction in afflictions, how it's the true nature of, phenomena. The second answer being, now, if the question really meant how can you explain emptiness if emptiness is something within the mind. So here, the answer is that it's not that emptiness only exists in the mind, or is only established on the basis of the mind. Emptiness is established on the basis of all phenomena. So the explanation given in the prior question, to answer the prior question, from Sean, was talking about the experience of emptiness being something you see within the mind, but emptiness itself is in all phenomena, right? Emptiness is the nature of all phenomena. So we can say, using a logical statement of pervasion, if something is a phenomenon, then it's necessarily empty of being established from a nature, or within nature. So that's like sort of the logical understanding, or a logical statement to understand that all phenomena are empty, or that emptiness exists within all phenomena. And then another point that Genla made is that we do say, emptiness is inexpressible, right? Emptiness. So it is something that you need to experience for yourself. There's a short version of the Prajnaparamita Sutra, which is sort of the most condensed, I guess one of the most condensed forms of it, which is simply one verse. And it's one of the first lines says, the Prajnaparamita is free of expression, free of thought, and free of it says speech, I guess, free of speech, unspeakable, unthinkable, inexpressible, something like that. So that's saying, what it's saying is that only the Arya beings, those noble beings who have the direct perception of emptiness, they're called Aryas, those noble beings, or Arya beings, only they can actually, really talk about emptiness and understand, express it and think of it in the way exactly as it is. So this verse, this Prajnaparamita verse, it really is saying that language, as well as conceptual thought, which I guess you could think of as intellectual experience or something, but anyway, conceptual thought and language, they are not able to engage with emptiness exactly as it is and just the way it is. So only an Arya being can do so. Any other questions?
Can I just check my understanding on something? My question is about, afflictions. That is it correct that we can reduce afflictions by understanding their faults and by applying practice to, reduce them, but that based on the experience of emptiness that we can eliminate them?
The nezo dende begin la so nyomong dezo chi nyomong karangi ken nyomong gi tribu nyomong gi ken dezo samlo tangne jebar jene nyomong shuk chungru tangya chi tablam yorebes enayang di chigre ani niba the nyomong 다른 녀몽기 랑신 끼는데서 삼락당내 녀몽 축충으로 저의 탑lâm 직당 자원의 방와디 동번이 공개해 디마도 탑lâm 매바 잡으시 덴데레 베게라 녀몽 다둥 직동번이 마공 공범매나 양 직 다른 녀몽이 끼는데서 삼락당내 융루 줘야 그냥 자원의 방에디 동반이 공개 드리베스
어디래 디 다라 레스 돈이 동반이 다와디 니무 베텐다 데메도 소에게다 니보 유나메나디 차데로와 다 돈이 마도네 되니 니모 중도 땅에 답시데 잘 나와나시 니모디 주나 아니 교 가리가리 용도 어쩌지 돈이로와 니모 발라 때네더니 교 가리 용도 니모디 중도 지나 아니 베니소소라 가리 대화용도 베나가라서 콩으로 슉치고 요와이나 소소 마데 미신다 마데와서요 와 아니 다도르슨 되자시다 티 무슨 가리 있네 다디 가수 시체와 요와점기 라야 마데 셰야 마데 소소기 내가 가리나 다 가리나 다 주절앞에 네 뭐지 깨고 와 다디인도다 뉴몬 tinde기 다 균줄라 삼무지 땅인데 아니 뉴몬디 깨 균진 개면도 삼미니 마중도 저 탑시직도 내고 와 뉴몬 원조 방와 세저와다 뉴몬 원조와 메와서요 다 뉴몬게 사변다 제와 메와서요 다 동료도 다와디 예버도 어디 때처럼 고와 다른 레스 어디 나고
Yes, that's exactly right. So to really eliminate completely from the root the afflictions, then meditation on emptiness is necessary. But to reduce the afflictions in your mind, then just seeing when they arise, what are they like? What are their faults? Getting familiar, getting yourself to become aware of their presence and their function, that will reduce their power. So if you think about anger and you see when anger arises in yourself, how much does it, what are its faults? What are the problems with anger? It makes yourself unhappy. It makes other people unhappy. When you have anger, it makes both yourself and others unhappy. So you see the different afflictions, each one with attachment, ignorance as well, delusion. You see, okay, what are all the ways in which it makes you unhappy and causes problems? And so by seeing all that and doing that kind of reflection, then naturally you'll see that they're problematic, they're undesirable, and you'll think that there's no point in letting these afflictions arise and having these afflictions. So naturally then you will be able to reduce their strength. So what's happening is that you're reducing the strength of the so we use this terminology of manifest afflictions versus afflictions together with their seeds. So you're not abandoning afflictions together with their seeds, but you are eliminating or reducing manifest afflictions when you do that kind of practice.
Okay, so there's a part 2 to the question if there's time. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Sometimes this is something I've spoken with Geshe Darge about, but in the context of this conversation, I want to ask again. Sometimes I've heard some Western teachers say that you can transform anger and compassion or transform ignorance into wisdom. But based on what we're just saying now, it seems to me you really cannot transform those afflictions into something different. You have to eliminate them and perhaps cultivate the more virtuous things, but there's not a transformation. Is that correct?
God base the gegen kashi the sungdangji konyo ani kompena nyomong gi gewe ilo gewe samlang ngor gyro taplam chik yore sungi dos pena control gi ningjing ngor gyro atang ani marikba timuk marikba di sharabi ngo gyurwa tablamji dende gogi do and di tanda karangi sungba samlatang karangi sungdang samlatangna di sharat taka duna negi is the mare kansana karangi sungban karangi sungdang samlatangna tambo nyomo meba so kore deni di jesu gewe lo that so young chik sardu ke gore nyomongi gewe lo la gyora yomarawas
디 교회 요 말에 다디 가서는 고 공도 시단 디모 간다 되지 디모 가리네 고 기비모나다 그런 교회 그런 용어라 믿는 거라 와리 가서는 공도 시단도 그런 kulon che koram ani kulon logare gewedo zo kulon din logare ine da ko mimo lamjong sin chi shejo pena ngage kapsuna shedan di lamdo kele wa deja lamjirs timu lamjirs dinde ngage kapsu chi sungo res ine da di gasna ngana zugoda koramgida lamdo cheres chedan di din sosu yugi ne nala dini 대다 대기 되니 자소 님모 바티 응외 많이 바체 대기 되더우지기 다 딘데지 공루고 나가 가서 송어 버렸어. 모두 지당 하나도 되자 코랑 기비 모르게 뉴시 아니 코로 코랑 기비 모르게 쓰니 가버렸어. 다이네 되자 시던 띠몰라 기비드는 동행데 아니 만아서 갱에 남도로 와서 저와 동행 총회도 동행데 다 소소소로 다네지 아 동행 총회도 동행들 앞에 미드 와시네 마대 와시 어떤 게 동해 등원에 가라 아니 개와 꾸마치기 두스 너 동해디 용해디 아니 얘기 말한 게다 미대와 뭐부지 체니 말한 게 있다 두자 체니 말한 게 있다 저거 동해 용어래 다다 친절한 얘기 오네 아니 딘데기 다지 내 개와 모두 미개와 미치 선비 딘데라 다 크기 주 삼바 장해요 동네 공세저라 뒤다오지니 모두 지금 오네 거랑 유몬디 람기 걸 주와당 아니 지가리래 어디 다시 딘데기 있다 뒤에요 말했어 또 그런 민남 장연들 와 딘데기 들어와 뭐 남정다 동네 남도 중앙세고 딘데기 다 공자야 온 걸 왔다고 동네 중에도 동네인데 동네 국민 신기 동네 강가 수술 맞지 수술 대화 강가 셔라 땅 세죠 그 미국 장당 돈이 내용 거라 모두 신기 동네도 수술 개도해요 뭐 수술 대화도 셔라 제도해요 그 시주 규타대로 와 이내 공자도 영용체도 딘데 지에 나시지 남정 지에지 요래스
there is no actual genuine transformation of afflictions into virtuous minds or virtuous states. So the very object and the aspects, since we're using that term already, the objects and the aspects of these non-virtuous afflictive minds versus virtuous minds are completely different to begin with. So they're just different. Their consciousness is of different nature. They're different. Now, at the same time, there is discussion, for instance, in tantric teachings, in the tantric tradition or teachings, there's discussion about bringing afflictions into the path. Right, bringing afflictions into the path, bringing attachment into the path, bringing anger into the path, bringing ignorance into the path, and so on. But it's not saying that you're actually transforming the actual affliction into something virtuous. It's like some kind of similar state, or there's some kind of similar mind to the afflictions, but it's not actually transforming the affliction into something virtuous. And likewise, there is a discussion about the bringing suffering. There's the teaching about bringing adversity into the path in general. And so there, what's happening is you're seeing that the afflictions create suffering, and then you're able to use that suffering as to practice based on that suffering and bring that into the path. And so in that case, there's especially the practice of tonglen, right, of sending and taking. That's very taught very widely. And so you're kind of seeing that you have the suffering from the affliction, so to accept it, to think that you're taking on the suffering of others, that you're, able to remove the suffering of others. So you use afflictions, right? You can think about taking all the afflictions of other beings onto yourself. You kind of use it in meditation as the object of your meditation, that you're taking on the afflictions of sentient beings, and that itself is, generating virtue by doing that. But you're not literally, right? You're not literally taking an affliction and making it virtue, transforming it into virtue. 나나 상하게 값수 간대송이 상하게 값수
송아갑수다 되샤람제다
영몽
시간
럼켈
어디
럼켈송이
예 되샤 신이바지 람라 두었고 말이스 되샤디라 때네 람지 고면이 야 되지 근데 숭고
알레 되잘라 때네 럼공이야
어디마도 지금 되샤코라 람이서 뒤져오지 근데 어디라
So okay, so I kind of misheard about what he was explaining for the tantric practice. It's not that it's something similar to the affliction that you change. It's what he's saying is that independence on the arising of the afflictions, on, for instance, attachment. So independence on, in some instance of attachment, you generate a path. You can do that practice. So it's similar to saying that you're transforming the desire into the path, but it's not actually becoming a path. You're generating a path with that as sort of as the basis or an dependence on it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Beyabadu.
Okay, now time is up, so stop. Yeah.
Chere Sewan Tenzin Jazo Shabe Sede Pa Den Juro Ji Kadin Duje Kamsu Chile Ju Dojo Dabi Lundo Jen Le Se Namla Rilamon Dumi De Lamdun Jebe Jela Sowa De Changju Simjo Ringo Maje Bana Jeju Je Jewa Nyamba Meba Konya Kondo Beva Jo Tazi Negi Sevi Menji Samu Tendre Tadang Travi De Pajo Lutu Yapse Gomba Chishi Kondo Jubi Juru Jewa Di Kevu Gun Sonama Ishi Leju Sonama Ishi Leju Damba Kuni Toba Jo. Thank you, Tujje. Good night. I wish you all a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Tujje.
Thank you, Geshe.